Hello and welcome to this premium episode number 367. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Premium means that this interview is reserved for you, our premium subscribers. So thank you for joining us today and for supporting the podcast with your subscription. If you are working in a PMO, then we have something good for you today. Lindsay Scott from Aris People is back to talk to us about the PMO Benchmark Report 2016. Yes, in the last episode we looked at the overall project management benchmark report, and right now it's all about PMOs. We are going to review who PMO practitioners are, who they work for, what their professional development looks like, how PMOs are set up, what functions they provide, where in the organization they are located from a reporting perspective. We'll hear some PMO thoughts and challenges, and finally, we are going to be talking about PMOflashmob.org. And now, what does the P in PMO stand for again? Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Lindsay Scott, Director of Aris People.
Hello, Lindsay. Welcome back.
Hi, Cornelius. Thanks for having me back.
To get us started, let's go through very similar questions we did in our last interview. So why are you doing this PMO-focused report? What are you trying to find out with this one?
Okay, so we'll keep this one brief. So PMO is basically for me and for Aris is that it's a really interesting area where we don't really understand enough. And one of the things we've recognised over the years is that actually we can probably do something around the whole PMO space on its own, because there's so many different facets to it over and above, what we would probably find with just project management practitioners. So yeah, there's a lot of different angles to go at. So we thought it probably deserves a report in its own right.
We know the first report, the regular project management benchmark report, you've been doing that for 11 years. What about the PMO benchmark report?
It's the first one.
Oh.
It is.
And how did you get that data here? Is this a completely different data set?
No, it's not, because the people that did the project management benchmark report were basically PMO people that took that report could say that, yes, I'd like to go on and answer these specific questions around PMO. Yeah, so we just kind of spliced the survey off. So it's the same data set. So it's a smaller group of people that create this PMO benchmark report. I mean, we've polled PMO people before in the past, but this is the first time we've actually put all the PMO-related content in one report to make it easier for the people that are specifically interested in PMO to pick up and read.
Mm-hmm. We know that Aris People does recruiting. Is there anything that you do specific for PMOs?
Well, we do recruitment for PMOs, but I suppose it's down to me. Okay, so this is I used to work in PMO before I started this business, so I've got a real affection for it and interest and all the rest of it. So actually, what I've done, over the last 3 years, is actually set up something a bit different. So it's a kind of away from Aris People a bit, which is something called PMO Flashmob, which essentially is a networking learning group for people here in the UK to get together that all work in PMOs. So I suppose it's not so much what does Aris do on that side, it's more me doing something in addition to, it's a kind of different vehicle, because, people hear that you work in recruitment and they automatically think, oh, she's here to, try and get you into a job or whatever. And I thought, actually, that's not what this is about. It really is about the profession of PMO and where it's going. That's far more interesting to me.
Right. I have PMO Flashmob here in my notes. We're going to talk about it towards more the end of this interview. So this is a little bit of a teaser for people. If you want to know about PMOflashmob.org, you got to keep listening on, because now we're going to open up the PMO benchmark report, and we want to take a look at the people and then also at the companies, the organizations that have PMOs. So let's talk about the people in the PMOs. Who are the PMO practitioners?
Okay, so we make it simple because I think most people would recognise that PMO is not necessarily very simple because there are various different types of PMOs and so on. But we kept it simple in terms of the roles here. So we've got portfolio manager, we've got PMO manager, and then we've got program stroke project support type people. So there's your hierarchy of the types of people that work within a PMO. So keeping it very simple at this stage. So in terms of like who these people are, and having looked at the wider report around gender splits in project management, which is about 70-30, actually with the PMO stuff, it tends to be about 61% male, 39% female. So a slight change, but also a change from the past. And what I would say, and this is more anecdotal than it is hard, cold, fast figures, because we're just starting to really look at it, is that I've been working in this field for from a recruitment point of view, so from since 2002. So obviously met and talked to a lot of PMO people over that time. And one of the things that you did tend to find in the earlier days was that it was a very female dominant role. I think it's probably because the PMO came out of like admin secretarial type positions initially. And
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, naturally you would get more women in those kind of roles. But what we found as for PMO has changed and is still changing quite dramatically and moving away from that admin secretarial role into something that's a lot more valuable to an organisation. So looking at things like portfolio management, strategy, stuff like that. So obviously that has attracted a lot more people because there's the higher salaries and all this kind of stuff. So you're starting to see more males coming in. But if you look at the figures, it's still dominated by females at the lower end of the scale, which tends to be the project support roles. And then, as it goes through the ranks to senior PMO manager, portfolio manager, it's more of a male dominance. So, yeah.
Right. All right. You touched upon a number of items right now. Let's delve a little bit more into this. So 61% are male, 39% female. Remind me again, how does that compare to the overall project management benchmark report that we talked about in the last interview? I think it's the same, right?
No, it's 70-30.
70-30. So this is now 60-40, basically. Yeah. So more women are in PMOs. And since you're saying that there is a shift away from the secretarial admin type PMO, does that also mean a shift away from women being in PMO? Traditionally, more admin oriented, unfortunately, in the workforce.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. Because when you look at the benchmark report, there's a bit when I'm asking the questions like, where are the women going? Because there's a lot of them. Are they choosing to stay within a support role rather than going through the ranks up to PMO manager, portfolio manager? I'm not sure, and it's going to be certainly something that I'm going to be interested in because are there certain barriers that are stopping women or not? I don't know. But this is a great thing about reports like this. It's throwing up something that I'm thinking, I wonder why that is. I wonder why. One of the things I'd thought about was actually when you look at some of the more senior PMO manager, portfolio manager roles, they tend to be people that have been senior project manager, program managers before. And then they take a kind of sideways step into running kind of like portfolio enterprise PMOs. So that could explain why you're getting more males at a senior level, because you're getting more male program managers. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to it's like a ball of wool. We just need to keep pulling that string and seeing where it goes.
It's only the first one, right? So you'll get to see this more over time. And as a little bit of a tidbit here to add to this gender discussion, the one thing that our listeners may notice is that female voices are few and far between here on the Project Management Podcast. And I'm actually right now in the middle of a big outreach to women in project management, trying to get more women to come and talk about the topics. So currently we're looking at strategy and business topics that we want to focus on in the coming months here. And it's difficult to find women who are, who have a voice and who blog and speak and who can be interviewed. So, here's a shout out to all our female listeners out there. If you have something to say, we want to hear from you. We want to do an interview with you. Now, moving on, a little bit, notice self-serving there. Let's get back to the PMOs. What kind of an education does one need? What kind of skills does one need today to be working in a PMO?
I think it's like a lot of project management profession as a whole, that actually most people do have a degree these days anyway. It's about 72% in the PMO. What is interesting is actually 34% of them have an MBA. And I think that's reflective of some of the senior levels of some of these portfolio manager roles and some of the PMO manager roles. They're actually quite senior within the organisations. Not all of them, but I think that kind of shows you that if you're going to be wanting to be at that level, that actually 34% do have an MBA. Might be worth thinking about. And that's in comparison to doing what we have as a master's degree here in the UK, which is people specialising in their next subject. So again, I think it's the MBA is probably the most important actually from a degree education. From accreditation, it's the most popular things are Prince 2 MSP, which is Managing Successful Programs, and P3O, which stands for Portfolio Program and Project Officers. Those are the three most, the ones that most people have who are working within this space. Have a look at the report for some of the other things that people are doing. There's some specialist stuff in there as well. In terms of skill set, the report does go into, over several pages, the different types of services and functions and services within the PMO, which gives you good insight into what skills are probably required. So, for example, across the whole lot, the most important aspects are governance, reporting and analysis, there's still administration in there, risk management and communications. So those are the top 5 areas. But we say that people that are working within a PMO or want to work within a PMO, these are the top 5 things that they're very well skilled in. In other words, this is what their PMOs actually require. So that gives you, again, in the report, it does break it down by different types of PMO. So you will start to see different profiles as if you're working in a portfolio PMO or a program PMO. I think we probably need to have a discussion about some of the structures, but I think we can, to help you maybe think about, well, what does a portfolio office do? What's a program office do, and so on. But I'll let Cornelius ask me that question.
Well, I've wanted to just focus on one more topic before we move on from the people over to the companies. And of course, that's the most important one. Money. You've mentioned salaries earlier on. What have you found here about salaries? And maybe if you could, take it back to the project management benchmark report, the overall, is there a difference between, just a regular project manager and somebody who works in a PMO?
Yeah, there is. If you're not too familiar with the PMO world, people are often really surprised when they find out that the portfolio office manager, or just known as a portfolio manager, actually they're one of the highest earners across the entire project management industry. So they can be commanding. Let's just say the average is 75k for a portfolio manager. That's sterling pounds. Where in project management the average salary is about 45k sterling pounds. So there's a big difference between them because the role is obviously vastly different. Where project managers are focused on delivering projects, the portfolio manager is more interested in the links between the strategy and delivery. So, and you tend to find that in the report you'll see different spikes on the salary data to show you that essentially you get spikes around the obviously the support analyst role, the PMO manager, and then the portfolio manager, and you can see those spikes throughout the salaries. But in terms of salary increases, we said with the project managers this year, 56% of them have managed to increase their salary. That's in comparison to 41% within the PMO world. So less increases going on there. But again, it's just early days, so we can't do a comparison. So to make that, is that statistically valid? Because we've got nothing to compare it to last year. So again, it's just early days, but that's what it is at the moment. And it's similar in the freelance world as well. You get similar spikes. But the interesting thing for people that are freelancing is that you tend to see less portfolio management opportunities as a freelancer. It tends to be a role that very much demands a permanent member of staff, which is really interesting because you don't tend to see that across any of the other roles within project management, just a portfolio one.
All right, and just a quick translation for our listeners outside of the UK, 75,000 British pounds on $99,836.25. And when we translate that into euro, we end up with 89,476 euros and 16 cent. That's where you are at there. Now let's move on to the companies. Shift our focus over there to the organizations that actually have a PMO. Who are those companies?
The vast majority of PMOs you'll find in private organizations, private sector. 68% of private sector you'd find the PMO, which comparison to public sector, so government, is only about 23%, and charities about 8%. So private sector industries really jumping onto this, that they need a PMO in place in order to be able to help make their projects more successful. And when we look at the private sector, the most popular areas where you will see a PMO is financial services. Obviously, IT organisations, that tends to be one of the biggest, and professional services type businesses, so those that are offering services to other organisations. And then when you start to look at where in the business they are, the vast majority sit within an IT department. So they're an IT-related PMO. The next popular are the ones that are more enterprise, which is where they will sit at board level. So, and that has always, totally backs up my anecdotal evidence from over the years that is the two prominent places where you tend to see a PMO, in the IT department and at the executive board level.
We're talking about the reporting structure here, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then from an organisation point of view, it's larger organisations that tend to have them. Smaller ones do, but it's 65% of PMOs will be in a large organisation. That's classed at about being over 1,000 employees. They also tend to be more international or multiple sites as well, which makes total sense when you think about some of the types of PMO structures that are definitely useful for organisations that are trying to deliver projects with diverse teams in different countries and things like that. So again, that's where you would tend to see PMO.
What type of PMOs did you find most commonly, if there is such a thing, in regards to objectives, maturity models, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's been brought out by a number of different researchers, actually, and I'm always pleasantly surprised. I don't know why, but the most popular type of PMO is a program management office, so primarily set up to support a program. Then it's a project office, then it's a portfolio office, and then what we call a centre of excellence. So by and large, there's 4 different types of models. And essentially, across those things, the most important thing that they do is 82% of them provide best practice, standards, governance, methods, templates, that kind of stuff. That's what the vast majority of them do. 75% of them offer specific services to a program or project manager. In other words, they're working quite closely at that project level and providing, right-hand support to that project manager. And then 62% of them are doing what we call this strategic support role, which is around how does the organisation take its strategy, select what projects they're going to do, and then ensure that the projects are delivered successfully. So those are the top 3 things that they do. And if you look back at the types, you will obviously see that most program type officers would probably be doing the first 2. So providing some best practice stuff, as well as providing some support to that program manager. Again, the portfolio type one will be doing more of that strategic support, because that's just the nature of what it is. It's just in that portfolio management role. So in terms of maturity, this is really interesting in that if you look at the maturity models that exist in terms of project management, we have one here in the UK that a lot of people use called P3, M3. And one of the things that they say around that maturity steps, it's 5 steps, and the first one being that the things that you're doing are very ad hoc. There's no set structures in place, and then obviously going right up to something that's totally optimized. And what we find is that ideally, for an organisation to be able to hit the middle mark, so number 3, you couldn't possibly do that without a PMO. It absolutely has to have a PMO in order for things to become embedded and repeatable in terms of what you're doing around project management. That in mind, we had a look and asked the questions. So what kind of PMO have you got in terms of its maturity level? So unfortunately, and here's some work that needs to be done, is that 44% of them thought they were around level 2, which is established. So 24% of them were embedded. Actually, 23% of them are ad hoc, in other words. So there's no set process. A lot of it feels like you're firefighting continuously. So there's a long way to go, I think, in terms of the maturity levels of the vast majority of PMOs. And again, that's borne out by, again, anecdotal conversations that we have all the time with PMO people about the frustrations that they feel working in their PMO within a certain organisation.
One of the most surprising findings that you mentioned in the project management benchmark report from our first interview was agile. Does this translate over into PMOs?
It's a hot topic at the moment, Cornelius.
Right.
Yeah, we within the PMO community are doing some research, shall we say? We're at a research stage, trying to understand where the role of PMO is around agile. I think there's so much still up in the air in terms of, well, can the organisation clearly state this is what we're doing around agile projects? Some people are doing bits and pieces. Is it truly agile? Is it not? All of this kind of stuff. Have we got the philosophy to do agile development and all this kind of thing? PMOs at the moment are just kind of sitting here and thinking, look, we know that we still need to have some element of control somewhere because the business needs it. They need to be able to see what's happening in all their projects, not just waterfall ones, but all of them. And we still haven't got to the point yet where we can quite clearly say, and I think the topic area is around agile governance. So, and then what is the role that PMO will play in that? Because generally when you're talking about a PMO, you talk about it in terms of functions and services. So a function would be, say, for example, planning, and your services would be stuff like, you provide a planning workshop, you'll facilitate a planning workshop, or you will create the Gantt chart. So those are the services within a function. What we're not at the moment is the agile support function, and we certainly don't know what those services would be in order to support that. That makes sense?
Yes, very much so. It not too surprising what you found here. One section of the report, actually one page of the report, is titled PMO Thoughts, full of thought bubbles and quotes. What is it about, and what are the 3 thoughts that stood out for you?
Yeah, like I said, I think with these reports, I'm just really keen for practitioners to get a voice out. And sometimes, with these reports, there's often numerous times you can actually write some stuff in, and I always like to share some of those thoughts, no matter how contentious or it's just this is what people are thinking about. So you do tend to see a correlation. So one of the things that correlation-wise that I see a lot within the PMO community is talking about adding value. It is one of it's one of those phrases that absolutely drives me up the wall, because what does it mean? Everybody's saying, oh, we need a PMO that adds value to the business. But actually, we want to know, well, what is adding value? What are the things to make up that will bring value to the organisation? So anybody that talks about value in any way, shape or form, I automatically jump on and think, right, okay, are they actually saying anything useful? Or is it this, everybody's jumping on this bandwagon saying, our PMO needs to add value, we don't know what to do, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's one of the quotes. But again, a lot of people say it, and we need to move on to the next stage now and start addressing what are the things that we should be doing, the practical things we should be doing that add value, rather than just moaning about the fact that we're not adding value. But the second one that jumps out at me, and this is really sad, this one, is that an organisation's not giving enough support around development for the people that work within the PMO. And one of the quotes says, they want us to be professional, they want us to do a good job. However, when it comes to showing support in terms of giving us some development or some training, or, it's not there. Organisations need to really think about this stuff, because you can't have it all. There's got to be something that, if you want a really great PMO, you've got to be able to invest in it. Which kind of leads me on to the next one, which is, we've already touched on it really, is the Agile PMO. One of the quotes is that somebody had said that they have no truck with people being agile, absolves them of any planning and reporting. Again, totally agree. But it's like, okay, let's do something about this then. Let's try and work out, is anybody within the industry doing something already in PMO and Agile? In which case, let's find them, let's drag them, and let's just find out everything that they're doing, and let's just try and get that learning out and get it out there in the community a bit more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Ever since we switched over to Agile and developing our PMP training tools with Agile processes, I've never done so much detailed planning on the various features on the lowest level. That never done really all that much before, because you really have to spell it out so that it can be developed to meet the quality that you're looking for. Right. We're coming back to the teaser that we mentioned at the beginning of the interview. PMOflashmob.org. What is PMOflashmob.org?
Well, essentially, it's a different type of group for people that work within a PMO. I mean, it's based in the UK, in that we meet up once a month. And some months we are literally just finding an old pub in London, and we get together and we have a few drinks and we talk about what's going on in our worlds, and people just get together and just have a chat. It's one of the reasons why we set it up, was that many people who work in a PMO, they often don't have many other people to talk to specifically about their PMO role, because, maybe you will be surprised about this, but actually a lot of PMOs are just one person. Yeah, so if it's not a PMO manager and lots of project analysts, it's actually a lot of the time just one person trying to do a PMO function of some kind. So they don't have anybody else within their organisation to bounce ideas off, or actually I've got a problem at the moment and I just want to have a chat through with different people and see what they think. So that's why it came about. So we still do that in the pub, and there's some really interesting old pubs in London, as you can probably imagine. But what we also do, we do PMO, what we call PMO mini masterclasses, which are little learning things. And the great thing about those is that, yes, we're doing it in a physical location, but actually, if you're interested in PMO, go and have a look at the website, because what we do a lot of the time is video these sessions, and they're available to you. We've got free webinars on there. We do write-ups of some of the sessions that we're running. So actually, it's a resource that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can have a look at the stuff. But what I also say to people, when it's been really interesting, Cornelius, is that a number of people have got in touch with me from around the world and said, we really want one of these. I've had them from Brazil, from America, Australia. And the great thing is that you can do it. You don't need anything. All it is just pulling some people together, having a chat in a pub and seeing where you go. That's the great thing about it.
I wish I had known this. I was in London 2 months ago, so you probably had a meeting while I was over there. How unfortunate. Let's get back to the PMO Benchmark Report 2016. We are going to be including this as a download for all our listeners. So if you are downloading this on your tablet or on your phone as a regular podcast, you can probably already see it in your device. But for those people who want to download the report themselves, we mentioned that the Project Management Benchmark Report, just go to araspeople.co.uk and look for it and sign up, and you can download it from there. I assume it's the same with the PMO report?
You can get the PMO report from Aras People, it's exactly the same place. But you can also get it from the PMO Flashmob website as well, and you will see the PMO benchmark report on there. So, again, if you're really into your PMO, I advise you to just sign up and get it there as well, because we'll keep you up to date with some of the things that we're doing, and obviously we've talked about some things like Agile PMO. That's where all the investigation work we're doing is through Flashmob. So, if you're interested in the developments and stuff, you should get signed up.
Right. I assume the benefit of downloading it from you is that you will then get in touch with people saying, hey, the new survey is out. Yeah. Fill it in. Yeah. All right. Finally, what are the 3 things that, based on your report findings, that PMO managers have to start planning for in the future?
Okay. So this is my top 3 is understanding the kinds of functions and services that your PMO is that you have in place now, but also taking the time out to think about what are the PMO functions and services would or should the PMO be providing. Because one of the things we've found is that actually the PMO has to be very flexible in terms of its services and functions, because the business is changing. So what might be a good place today might not necessarily be the right kind of thing in a year's time, because one of the things that the report does show, and other research backs it up, is that PMOs tend to have a lifespan of about 3 to 4 years. I think generally what happens is that the PMO still exists after that time, but actually it's evolved because the business has changed. So that's the first thing that I would put out there for PMO managers especially to be thinking about, is doing some planning and thinking around where the PMO is going to be going. The second one is about automation, and I think many people will be like, yeah, and we're still using Excel spreadsheets as well. But I actually think that it's holding the PMO community back, because it's stopping them from getting involved in some other interesting functions and services, because they're too busy messing around with Excel spreadsheets at month end, because it's just still like really basic stuff. There's obviously a lot of PPM tools out there, and I'd really like to see, that there'll be more people moving away from Excel and actually getting proper solutions. And the third thing really is about the portfolio conversation. And one of the things that we've said is that actually portfolio office is a relatively small amount at the moment. It's about 18% of the total types of PMOs that are out there. But I think that's going to increase quite dramatically over the next few years. So again, I suppose a thing out there for you, if you're working within a different type of PMO today, perhaps maybe thinking about where your organisation is going or where you want to go professionally, it's about the portfolio conversation. So what is your organisation doing around strategy development? What are they doing about bridging the gap between strategy and execution? And basically that is a completely different kind of conversation. And, it's an area that, we're certainly finding is growing, and absolutely the stuff that's coming out of PMI at the moment, the pulse of the profession have been really useful, really interesting, because, we're seeing the same kind of thing happening here. So again, 2 different things to think about: portfolio management in your organisation, but is this a career avenue that I want to explore as well?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time today, Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Cornelius.
And that was the PMO Benchmark Report 2016 interview with Lindsay Scott. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. It's not the hours that count. It's what you do in those hours. Until next time.